Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. Hopefully, you're having a great day so far. Thank you for tuning in and joining us today. Before we kick off the session, as usual, I have a little bit of housekeeping. So, today's session will last for roughly round about 45 minutes, and it's going to include an interview with our speaker before we later move on to a student Q&A. Questions for our speaker can be submitted via the Q&A function. Now, depending what device you're using will depend where it appears on the screen, and you might have to scroll down a little bit to be able to see the Q&A box. But that box is open now, and it will remain open through the entirety of today's session. So if you have any questions at all, please do get a chance to ask. You might not get a chance to ask these questions again, so don't feel stupid or anything like that. Ask as many as you like. There's no bad questions, and keep those coming in. Now, if you do find yourself to be experiencing any sort of issues, please do also let us know via that Q&A box, and one of our moderators will be on hand to help where we can. Do keep an eye on that box, as well as towards the end of the session, we will have a feedback poll that will go live. This is maybe 10 minutes towards the end or so. And that's a chance for you to let us know how you found today's session. And all of our feedback will be shared with our speaker, Caroline. So please do let us know how you found it. Now, all that is said and done, excited to move on to today's main event. We're very, very delighted to welcome Caroline Lamb, who is the Chief Executive at NHS Scotland and the General Director for Health and Social Care. Caroline has an incredible career, leading in the NHS. Particularly, I believe, around digital health and workforce development, which is really interesting. And she's really passionate around the digital technologies and enhancing healthcare services. How can we best support the NHS and support the growth of the NHS and the workforce? So we're really excited to be able to talk to her today, to kind of grill her and get some information about how you young people watching might be interested in building your future careers in health and social care. So, without any further ado, will everyone please welcome Caroline. Hello, hello.
Hello. It is lovely to be here. Thank you very much indeed for having me.
Thank you for joining us. I hope that introduction was okay, but it's never going to be enough of what you kind of say yourself. So, diving straight in, first question, could you tell us from your point of view a little bit about your role and what it is, and then how you got there?
Yeah, of course. So, as you probably noticed, I sort of have two titles in that I am Chief Executive of NHS Scotland, but I'm also Director General for Health and Social Care at Scottish Government. And if I start with that second title first, the Director General role, what that means is that I am the principal advisor to Scottish ministers. So to our Cabinet Secretary, Neil Gray, and to his ministers, but also to the First Minister on matters that relate to health and social care. Of course, I don't do that on my own. I have a huge team around me. But I provide the advice that helps ministers to make their decisions about setting policy, priorities, and what they want to do with the health service. My other role is as Chief Executive of NHS Scotland, and in that role, I'm really responsible for working with our 14 territorial boards and 8 national boards to make sure that those ministerial priorities actually get delivered on the ground. I suppose the key part of my responsibility there is managing the budget. So health spends a huge amount of money. Our budget is nearly £22 billion in this year. And a lot of that money is allocated to our NHS boards. And those chief executives have delegated responsibility from me as the principal accountable officer for the budget to make sure that that money gets spent well and effectively. And I think you wanted me to also talk a little bit about how I got here.
Please do.
So I start off by saying I'm not a clinician. I'm not a medic or a nurse. I have come into this job through a range of roles, largely in management of services. So I went to university and studied philosophy actually, and then I trained as a chartered accountant. And accountancy might not seem the obvious way into a role like this, but when I talk to you about that 21 billion budget, you can probably imagine just how important it is that I sort of understand my way around numbers a little bit. So after I qualified as an accountant, I worked in a number of different organisations. Including,
Oh, just gonna interrupt you. Your sound's gone a little bit odd,
oh, has it?
and I can't, yeah, fix it from my end. It's just a little bit staccato, so I'm not sure why that's happening. Don't know if it's worth unmuting and remuting. Sometimes that resets it.
I can hear that staccato noise as well now. I've just taken. Is that a bit better?
It's not. I'm not sure what's going on with it. Try talking again.
Hello, can you hear me any better now?
Yes, that's done.
Okay.
You're back.
Right. Okay. Well, let's just persevere, shall we? But do shout again if it gets bad again. I've moved to holding the device I'm speaking to you on instead of having it in a sort of foldy thing. So let's see if that works any better. So I think I was saying that I qualified as an accountant and I worked in a number of sectors. Um,
Oh, it's gone again. I'm wondering if it might be worth try. I don't know. Oh, refreshing. Wondering if it might be worth you. I know we're live, but I can cover talking in the meantime. Worth
should
sort
I
of.
leave and join?
Let's leave and rejoin. We
Okay.
love tech issues. It happens no matter what. So see you in a second. And now you're faced with me, waiting with me while we sort this out. So hopefully this will work. Unsure what's happening because we didn't have any issues earlier, and it started fine at the beginning, just popped up. But these things happen, don't they? Here we go. Let's try again.
Okay. Is that better?
Perfect again. Let's see how long we get.
Right. Well, we know how to fix it, but it might get a bit interrupted if we're ducking in and out all the time. Okay. So I worked in a number of sectors. I worked in housing, I worked in education, and then I moved into a job in health, in a health board. And you talked about my interest in the workforce training and development. A lot of that comes from the fact that I joined NHS Education for Scotland, which is our national board responsible for attracting, recruiting, retaining and training the workforce. And I became chief executive in that board. And as part of my role there, I was really interested in how we could use digital technology to better effect. So we did a lot of work on digital technology. And then towards the end of 2019, I was asked if I'd like to come and do some work around digital in the Scottish Government for health and social care. And I thought that sounded like quite a good opportunity. And you'll have noticed the date, December 2019. So within a month, there was this sneaky little virus developing in China. And it was pretty much all hands to the deck. So I did do work on digital, but I also led the work to increase our ICU intensive care provision. I set up the contact tracing scheme for Scotland, and probably one of my proudest moments was actually developing the rollout of the vaccination. So building the system that we use to help vaccinate everybody across Scotland. And having done all that, when this job came up, I thought, my goodness, it can't be any more frenetic than what I'd been through during the course of 2020. So that's how I ended up here, and I've been in this role since January 2021.
Awesome. That's crazy. I imagine I can't even. In fact, I can't even imagine what it was like to work in the NHS during COVID. But yeah, truly amazing, and clearly you're doing some amazing work now, which is great. Our next question then is, a lot of people when they think of the NHS instinctively think of doctors and nurses, and that either of those roles is sort of the end all and be all, but there are so many other careers. What do you think are some areas in the NHS that our young people should consider if they're interested in a career in health and care that might not be one of those two roles that are needed?
Yeah, so absolutely, we need nurses. We need lots of nurses. We need lots of doctors. There are also lots of other clinical roles as well. So we employ paramedics through the Scottish Ambulance Service. allied health professions, so people with skills in things like physiotherapy, occupational therapy, voice and language therapists, psychologists, and what we call healthcare scientists. So a lot of the people who do the lab-based work, so testing for various conditions. So there are loads and loads of clinical roles, but also our health service, we have to run big estate. So we have lots of people who are engineers, who are plumbers, who look after some of the really complex equipment and machinery that we have. We have cleaning staff, we have catering staff, we have lots of administrative staff, and lots of staff involved in digital as well. So lots of people involved in maintaining all our computers and IT assets, but also increasingly in helping us to integrate our systems, helping us to build and develop new systems, and really importantly, helping us to collect and analyze all the data we have, because we have lots of data and we need to use that to help us to understand what we can do better and what things we need to do differently looking forward into the future. So many jobs.
Yeah, I imagine that data is huge as well because of the NHS is so big. And yeah, it must be really interesting, that sort of management and development and stuff. So lots of interesting things you wouldn't normally think about, really.
That's right. I mean, we employ over 188,000 people across NHS Scotland. So it's a big workforce. And within that, there are lots of opportunities. And I think sometimes people think about working for the NHS as working in hospitals, but actually, it's working out in people's homes, it's working in community centres, working in general practice, working in ambulances, going from place to place. There are so many different locations as well as different jobs.
Definitely. I always remember them coming into school sometimes as well and doing stuff like that. So there must be so much you can do. Our next question for you then is, is it as tough as people say? You know, everyone is always talking about, when you think of the NHS, you think about manicness of it being really crazy and really difficult. Is it really difficult? Is it that level all the time? And if so, what motivates you to keep going and keep putting yourself in that sort of high paced, fast paced job?
So there is no doubt that there are areas across NHS Scotland that are under a lot of pressure, and people working in very, very busy emergency departments and people working on very, very busy wards. And we're working very hard to try and ensure that we can manage some of those peaks in demand. I'm sure you don't look at the A&E statistics as often as I do, but believe you me, I get them delivered onto my desk, onto my laptop every single morning at 10:30, and they're one of the first things I look at, because how well our A&E departments are performing is an indicator of flow through the system, and therefore it's a really important measure for me. And actually, that's improving. Things are improving. We are getting to see people faster, and that's what we all want. We all want to be working in a service where people are not having to wait. But actually, a lot of the health service just operates really efficiently day in, day out. We see a huge number of patients, whether that's at the general practice or in our hospitals or people phoning NHS 24. The volumes are really significant, but actually, on the whole, I think most people find that these are really rewarding jobs, particularly if you're somebody who likes working with people. And I suppose for me, I think that feeling of thinking that you're doing something that is helping to improve somebody's lives, often at a point which is really difficult for them in their lives. And actually, yes, it is busy, but I think so long as we're all focused on what we can do to make things better for each other and having a great team about you, that all makes it manageable.
And I love that you finished on that, because our next question is around sort of team, I guess. People, when they think of skills, one of the top ones that comes up again and again is teamwork, particularly within the NHS. So, why is that so key to your role and other roles in the NHS? Yeah, and what makes it so important to helping it run the way it does?
So I think team and team working is absolutely critical into the way in which we work across NHS Scotland. And that's because there isn't a single one of us that can be an expert in everything. We all need to be able to bring together our collective skills and experience to understand what's right for the patients that we treat and for their families and their loved ones. So teamwork is really important. When you think, for example, that in general practice nowadays, we will often have a GP who is the expert in medicine, but expect an expert in general practice medicine. They will need to work with teams of hospital consultants for more specialist and more acute conditions. And they also, many of them now, rely on pharmacists within their teams to provide support around prescribing and understanding what combination of drugs might work for somebody and what combination of drugs might not be the right thing to give to somebody. Physios who can help people who've got, back pain or other musculoskeletal issues, and a whole range of people wrapped around an individual. Increasingly, we're also looking at how we can support people to make sure that, for example, they're maximizing their income, they're accessing all the benefits that they are entitled to, that they know how to access care and support in their local community. Things like being members of a walking group and helping to get fit. So it needs a whole range of people wrapped around you. And in my job, and I talked about my role as advisor to ministers, I can't do that on my own. I need to draw on the skills and expertise of people who are experts in medicine or experts in nursing or experts in infection and experts in testing regimes, all of that in order to be able to make sure that we're providing the best advice to ministers that we possibly can.
And when you think of that, it's crazy about how many jobs there are and how many different industries you are. We're very complicated people, aren't we? And when we get sick, we cause ourselves lots of complicated problems. And it's great to have all these experts out there in different fields to help solve those problems. Yeah, there's so many people out there that go, I am a medical anomaly where people can't figure out what's wrong with me. And I guess you need all those teams to try and do that.
That's absolutely it. Absolutely it. Of being able to ensure that you, like I say, you can't expect one person to know it all. So it's about picking out those different bits of skill that you need and bringing them together to reach a solution for an individual.
Yeah, good problem solving, I guess.
Exactly.
But
Exactly. Working together to solve a problem.
yeah. Um, a little bit of a subject change then is we know you've spoken a little bit, particularly within your introduction, around sort of the digital and the work that you're wanting to do. Got a little bit sidetracked by COVID, but still did some of the great work with that. Um, what are some really cool innovations or kind of new things that are happening in the NHS that people might not be aware of because, they're not to do with us, but are interesting to talk about?
Yeah, well, I'll maybe start with something that probably doesn't feel that cool, actually, but it's a little bit about us trying to catch up with where the world is and how people increasingly are using mobile devices. So I'm sure that everyone on this call uses their mobile phone to buy things, to check their bank accounts, to arrange travel, to know when the next bus is coming, all of that. And we've been a bit slow with all of that in the NHS. So what we're doing is building something that we call the digital front door, which is going to be launched. The first it's being launched just in NHS Lanarkshire to start with at the end of this year. So December this year is the date, which will be a start to enabling people to be able to access all their own health records online, to be able to start to book appointments, to change appointments, to get the things like results of tests and to do all of that. So to take away some of the paper-based systems that we've got at the moment, but to increasingly join that up and enable people to maybe start to link in. A lot of us have also now got apps that help us track how many steps we're doing, that tell us what time we got up, what time we went to bed, and all that. So to start to be able to link in that, so that people are increasingly able to manage their own health and well-being as well. And I said that that doesn't feel particularly cool or exciting because it's really us just catching up. But my goodness, there's a lot of other cool and exciting stuff going on as well. So one of the things that I think is really interesting is the use of robotics to do surgery. And that's not just letting a robot go off and do it. There is always a surgeon there. But the use of robots means that surgeons can be much more precise about what they're doing, and can which means that there is a better recovery time for patients and better outcomes for patients at the end of the day. I mean, I've had a go with some of these robots, and I promise you, you wouldn't want me operating on you, even with a robot. You need to have trained properly to be able to do these things. And I think the other opportunity for us, which is really exciting, is around artificial intelligence, and whether we can increasingly train computers to do things like reading X-rays, for example, or reading scans, whether we can train computers to be able to pick up things that are probably quite difficult to pick up just with the human eye. And so again, it's not just about being able to do things more quickly, it's about being able to do things in a way that's better for people and better for their recovery and for their outcomes.
Really interesting, and definitely some cool stuff. I know you said the first one wasn't, but when you think about the size of the NHS, pulling it into new technologies is not a small task for anybody. And wouldn't we all love just having the ease of it and everything interlinking? I am one of those people that tracks sleep and steps, so I'm sure there's many people out there that are the same, and it's becoming more common to do so. So
Yeah.
yeah, really
And
interesting.
yeah, and you're absolutely right that the size of the NHS is does make it challenging to start to link together all our disparate systems, because we're thinking not only about all the hospital systems we've got, but also being able to link into general practice. And when I tell you that there are nearly 1,000 general practice across Scotland, then you can understand that that all starts to get quite complex.
Definitely, such a huge scale. So, what might be one of the best things about working for a company that's as large as the NHS? Like, what do you find to be the best bit?
So I think the advantages of working for the NHS are, first of all, that it is there are so many opportunities. So if you, for example, if your circumstances change and you want to move from the central belt in Scotland up to one of the islands or the north of Scotland, then there will be jobs for you. You will be able to transfer your employment. There will be jobs. You will understand the way in which the systems operate, and you can easily move around. So it's easy to move location. It's also really, I think the whole of the NHS is very focused on career development. And so no matter what job you go into the NHS as, no matter how you join the NHS, then there will be people who want to support you and focus on what you can do to train and to develop your own career. And that means that people often end up taking very different career pathways from the ones that they might have originally envisaged. I think as well, it's a really supportive environment to work in. And we talked a bit about team working, and working with a team, I think, helps people, people connect with each other. They get to know the team that they're working with. They get to trust each other. And to work really well together. And fundamentally, we're a good employee. We have fair terms and conditions, still have a good pension scheme, and do our best to make sure that we have really good positive cultures that are inclusive of everyone, no matter who you are, what your beliefs are, where you come from, what your background is, because the NHS needs to reflect the community. So we need people working in the NHS who reflect the communities that we're here to serve. So yeah, I think the NHS is a fabulous place to work. It's also a really rewarding career, and it's back to that. At the end of the day, what you're doing is helping people, and helping to improve their lives and supporting them quite often at really difficult times, and that is incredibly rewarding.
It sounds it, and it sounds really lovely. Like the way that you talked about the NHS just then made it sound really, really wonderful. Maybe I want to join the NHS, bit of a career change. Um, Talking then on kind of what you've mentioned, um, around the ability to move around and the development for those young people watching, what are the top skills that they should be focusing on now while they're either in school or while they're in college, before they take that next step to getting their degree or whatever it might be to get them into the NHS? What should they be thinking about developing?
So I think from what I've said so far, you will all appreciate, and from your own contacts with the NHS, this is a very people focused business. The NHS is all about looking after people and working with other people in order to provide that care. So being able to work together as teams, really caring about other people and wanting to help them. So I think there's some values that sit at the core of what you need if you want to develop a career in the NHS. And so I would really encourage you to try and get as much experience as you can, whether that's volunteering or through other opportunities of working with people from all sorts of different backgrounds and experience and life experiences, and really starting to build your set of values as to how you want to live your life and how you want to work. Clearly, after that, it depends on what role you want to go into. And there are some roles, like becoming a doctor, for example, that require many years of study and alongside training on the job. There are other roles, like if you wanted to come in as a healthcare assistant, there are other roles that don't require so much training, but that once you're in those roles, as I've said, there are also opportunities to develop your career, including then maybe thinking about going on to further education or doing more training to enable you to develop those roles. And I think we also have this sort of philosophy about there being no wrong door. So whatever you do and whatever you do in your career, I think there is always an opportunity that something in there will have equipped you should you want to decide that actually where you want to be is working for the NHS.
I love that. A lovely piece of advice, and also something to think about. Like, there's always going to be a way, which is really lovely. The final question, then, before we move on to our student Q&A, is a big switch up. We haven't asked anything like this, but we know how important it is to young people, and it's really something that gets asked all the time, and particularly around the NHS. And it's a question around the environment and sustainability. So obviously, the NHS is one of the biggest companies across the entirety of the UK, Scotland, England, Wales, all of it. Um, you know, what is it doing to focus on being more sustainable and environmentally friendly, understanding that there are parameters within the NHS that don't allow for that for health and safety?
So actually, I think we've got quite a good story to tell on what we've been doing around our green policies and wanting to become more sustainable. We have an NHS Scotland Sustainability Action Plan, which is all about what are the things that we can do to minimise our impact on the environment in a positive way. And they range from really quite simple things, like ensuring that there are green transport routes to our main hospital buildings, looking at the things that we procure and trying not to procure single-use plastics. I have to say that was a massive challenge in the pandemic, absolutely enormous. And actually, the whole question of the purchasing of PPE, personal protective equipment, is still a real challenge in terms of trying to get away from single-use approaches and find something that genuinely can be laundered and cleaned and then appropriately used without putting people at risk through infection control. And then at the other end of the spectrum, things that I probably wouldn't have thought of were things like the type of gases that we use in operating theatres, so anaesthetic gases and the type of gas that we use. But some great work done up in NHS Highland, switching the type of gas that was used to one that was significantly less damaging for the environment and actually cheaper as well. So there are lots of opportunities, even things like inhalers. So if you suffer from asthma, trying to think about how we can prescribe more uh, inhaling equipment that lasts longer so that we're reducing our impact on the environment. So there is a lot that we're doing. We're also looking at how we can use heat pumps on some of our hospital estate, how we can generate our own power, because it takes a lot of power to run your average hospital. And again, that's something that can help us with best use of money as well as best use of the resources.
It's always the best feeling, I imagine, when you find something that is benefit to the world and also to cost. Two things we're always trying to improve.
Absolutely, make me very happy.
Yeah. Great. So that is our sort of final question from our set questions. We're going to move on to our student questions. So if you do have something to ask, please do get those sent in, because now's the time and we'll get through as many as we can in the next 10 or 15 minutes. Okay, great. We'll start with this question, which is, did you always want to work in the NHS, or did you sort of fall into it?
So that's a great question. I think actually I always really quite fancied working in the NHS, and when I qualified as an accountant, I thought about going to work for an NHS board then, and I couldn't really see any jobs available. So I ended up going into housing and then education before I finally made it into the NHS. But certainly one of the attractions of the job that I eventually went for was that it was the NHS rather than anything else. And actually, having worked in housing and education first, I think actually gave me some good skills for working into for moving into what's another big part of the public sector.
Oh, sorry, I dropped my microphone then. Um, yeah, and that's that sort of thing. I wonder if, do you find that many people have the same then, that there is a sort of an inkling to work within the NHS? Maybe it's that sort of helping people element.
Yeah, I think there's a number of things that motivate people towards working in the NHS. I mean, I think the NHS, it's our biggest public service, and it touches on so many of our lives as well. So so many of us either have direct cause to be grateful to the NHS or on behalf of things that they've done for us, or for our families and friends. And I think people feel a huge loyalty and interest in the work that the NHS does. And then over and above that, as I've said, there's just such a range of careers available. And of course, then there are the TV programs, and people think, oh, well, it might be quite good fun to to work, whether it's the real life paramedic programs, or whether it's Casualty or something like that. That people look at those and think that it looks like an exciting and interesting place to work, which it is.
Definitely. Makes me think about what you said about volunteering and getting some work experience to see if it is for you if you are interested. And do always keep a lookout, because we sometimes run different work experience placements and things virtually for people who want to try and see what these different industries are like. So it's always worth keeping an eye out for that sort of stuff as well. Our next question, do you get to travel?
That's a great question as well. So I definitely get to travel a lot in Scotland. So I try to get up to Shetland and Orkney and out to the Western Isles, and so to some of the furthest flung reaches of NHS Scotland. I try to do that at least once a year, and I really enjoy that. It's great because that our healthcare systems out in our more remote and rural areas of Scotland are very different to the ways in which you see health services run in the sort of big populated cities, and they're like that because they have to be. And so they make an absolute virtue, and probably some of the most exciting innovations you see are the ones that have been developed in our more remote and island communities. Other than that, I would love to say that I get to go abroad often, but I don't. There used to be more travel abroad, and certainly there is a big benefit, I think, to learning from what other countries are doing, because every bit of the world is facing similar challenges, certainly in the developed world, around aging populations. Um, but in these days of technology, it's dead easy just to hook up with folk like this, and therefore to avoid the air miles, and to avoid all of that. So, and equally, I work really closely with colleagues from Northern Ireland, from Wales, and from England as well, because we all share exactly the same issues. So, again, we try and meet up in person about once a year because it's really good for establishing relationships. But it's also, doing Teams call, video calls, that helps us in between and saves the travelling.
Yeah, there has to be endless meetings, doesn't there? There's just no way to avoid your meetings. They've got to be done. They're key, and it's sustainable in a way, isn't it? It's much cheaper and easier on the world to log on to a call than it is to go in person. So yeah.
That's right.
Um, Great. Someone's asked an interesting question here, which is around stereotypes in the NHS. So someone's asked, are there stereotypes in the NHS from what you've seen?
That is a really interesting question. I think that the NHS gets stereotyped in a number of ways. So I think that the NHS has been around for nearly 80 years, and as I've said, people really value it. It's like this national treasure, and I think quite a lot of people have fairly fixed ideas about what the NHS looks like, but I don't think that that really relates to what the NHS looks like these days. So, increasingly, I think, a stereotypical approach would be that you had doctors, generally men, nurses, generally women, and that the doctors were sort of in charge of everything and everybody else sort of had to obey the doctors. That's not the world that we live in any longer. When I talked about teams, this is genuinely about people understanding each other's perspective and each other's skills. So our doctors are not predominantly men any longer. In fact, I think in general practice we have more women than men now working as GPs. And our nurses, we have lots of men working as nurses as well. So those stereotypes are breaking down, but also the hierarchies are not as acute and the same as they used to be. So our doctors, our consultants will absolutely understand that they need a social worker to provide them with advice. They might need an occupational therapist who can help them to understand what sort of adaptation somebody needs in order to be able to be discharged from hospital and go back to their home. So this is very much about a team working together, respecting each other's perspectives. I think there's still more that we can do across the NHS in Scotland to be more diverse, to be more inclusive, and to really reflect those populations that we're here to serve. We have a ethnic minority group, leadership group and leadership forum across NHS Scotland. I meet with them really regularly to hear what more we can be doing, what more the Scottish Government can be doing to help to not just encourage people from ethnic minorities to come into health, but also to support them and to make sure that they're getting exactly the same opportunities to develop their careers and to move into the highest levels of management and responsibility.
It's exactly what you said earlier, isn't it, about making sure that the workforce reflects, the community. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
given that.
exactly that. It's really important.
All right, we're almost at the end of our time. I don't know about you, but this has flown by. So we're on our final question. And it's a question around the application process and interviews. So, is it a long application process? And what about the interviews to get into a role in the NHS?
Right, that's a difficult one to answer because it depends very much what sort of role that you're applying for. So we started off talking about it's not just doctors and nurses, but for a doctor, for doctors, the application process is really first of all to get into university and to study medicine. And once you're in university and studying medicine, there is then a very well structured route that enables you to do some of your training in NHS boards, that then essentially moves you into a job as what used to be called a junior doctor. We now call them residents in NHS boards, and then supports you to move up to becoming a fully qualified consultant doctor. For nurses, again, you would need to apply to a university degree course. And then following that, most of our health boards really actively recruit the nurses who are due to graduate from their local universities and colleges. And nurses will all spend, as part of their degree programme, they will spend some time working in hospitals. So by the time you come out with a degree, you already know, you've already got a good idea of what it's like in your local hospitals, where you want to work, or if you want to work in primary care, and therefore you're well equipped and well supported. If you're thinking about applying for one of the other roles, so I talked about administrative staff, I talked about IT staff, engineers, cleaners, catering staff, people looking after the grounds. Then we have there's a NHS jobs website. It's a standard application form for all the roles across NHS Scotland, and there's lots of help and advice on the website to help you to navigate that process. So we do try to make it as easy as possible. And we also offer apprenticeships. So, that's another route into it to where so you can be studying at college, but also get paid for working while you're studying.
Yeah, love that we haven't forgotten about apprenticeships because they're getting more and more popular. And for
Oh,
people who love
hugely,
that
yes.
practical side, it can be a lot of kind of helpful rather than just being more sort of course based. Um, we've had a couple of other questions come in just last minute, so I might sneak in an extra one and
Okay.
then we'll end. Um, so we've got two. Someone's asked about UCAT test. It says, "Did you do the UCAT test?" But I imagine that's very different now to what it was when you were doing it. And they've asked how hard it is. Don't know if you have any advice on that. And then the other one is how you persuade young people to join the NHS. But you might have touched on that already around recruiting from courses and things.
Sure. So no, I didn't do the UCAT test. I'm not sure they even had that in my day, if I'm honest. I have done a number of tests, including ones to get to this job. And I suppose my advice would always be to do a lot of practice in advance of doing the actual test. So make sure you really understand the type of things you're going to be asked and that you've prepared for it well. And in terms of persuading young people to come into the NHS, I mean, I think that if you know people who are working in the NHS already, have a chat with them. Hear about the good bits as well as the bad bits, because there are pressures, and sometimes it can be a tough job, because sometimes it can be a tough job dealing with people when they're in very difficult circumstances. But I remain convinced that it is a brilliant job. I know many people who work across NHS services, and I know that they're all hugely committed towards what they do. And I know that they appreciate the relationships that they have with their colleagues, with the people that they're looking after, and also the opportunities that they have to think about innovation and change and improvement, because we are all in this game to try and make things better for everybody.
Definitely. We will wrap up now. So, if you are interested, it might be worth checking out our broadcast library because we do have lots of other talks from different people from different areas of the NHS. I think we spoke to a paramedic and things at some point last year, so it might be worth watching those if you have a specific interest in one of those areas to see if we have something. But that's sort of the end of today's session. We are definitely out of time. So, Caroline, do you have any final thoughts and feelings you'd like to share with us as we sort of wrap up and say goodbye for the next couple of minutes?
So, no, I'd just like to say thank you so much for having me. I have really enjoyed this. Thanks for your brilliant questions. And, you guys are the future of our workforce. So I hope that at least some of you will go on to come and join us and work in the big family that is NHS Scotland. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We've loved it. It's been great. All right, everyone. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for today. A huge thank you for sending in your questions. Hopefully, you're feeling a little bit more kind of prepared or interested. And as I say, we've got loads of different videos from different people from the NHS in our library. And also, do look out for work experience placements that might be interesting. We might not have something now, but we might in the future. So keep checking, and hopefully, you have a great rest of your day. And we will see you next time. That's it for now. Bye, guys.